This video has been cut short for YouTube. So if you're interested in hearing the entire live stream, head to one of my other platforms. The link's in the description.
This is how wonderful it is to work on a set.
Finally got it.
I feel like it's something out of, you know, Silence of the Lamb or something like that. You know, I mean, this is sitting on set, separated 6 feet from people. And this is for All Rise, and they were doing current time. So not only that, I had to keep the mask on when I was on set playing an attorney. Nightmare. So I got tested with a PCR test, and that was going to take 5 days. I'm on my way home. She called me and said, "Hey, Felix, it came back positive, the nasal swab antigen test. So you probably have it. Now you've gotten 2 positive tests and one negative." And I had started feeling something in my throat. So I run into Trader Joe's, I get all my food, and I lay down and wait for the sweet angel of death. And I had a 90, I mean, I didn't know. I mean, you know, let's face it, I've heard all the news too, right? And I'm in a bad age group, but I don't have any comorbidities. I'm a fitness trainer. I take all my vitamins. Plus I've been taking quercetin, you know, glutathione, zinc, magnesium, all of those that they hate us telling you about. I had a temperature of like 98 that night. I felt it spike a little bit because my normal is 96, 97. And then from then on, it was just, and I take cough syrup because I wanted to break up anything that might develop from the 99-cent store, no less. And I was done by Friday. And then I get my PCR test. But that week I was trying to call the lab because I wanted to know the PCR threshold. Because I also wanted to make sure that I had COVID and not a cold, because all it felt like to me was a cold. So I call the lab. They're giving me the runaround, telling me, "Oh, it depends on patients." And I said, "What?" And we don't give out that information. And I said, "What? This is my bodily fluid. You're testing it for me and my insurance company. I want to know the threshold." So they gave me the runaround. Finally, on Friday, I get my results, and it's positive PCR for COVID. Somehow, they got me through to the head of the lab that day. And this is where it gets good. And at first, he's trying to give me the runaround. Like, "Yeah, you know, well, you know, we can't really tell you." I said, so I started telling him all the science that I knew about PCR threshold and what I'd learned in the past year, because this is January. So he figured I knew what I was talking about. And then I told him that I was an actor here in town working on sets. And I said to him, I said, "Doctor, so you mean to tell me that if I get an antigen test on a set, that is not telling me that I have COVID, yet still being reported to the city as a COVID case?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "And really, I don't know that until I have a PCR test?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "Felix, off the record, none of the studios, producers, or anyone else in Hollywood is listening to the doctors and the labs. They're doing whatever they want. We've told them that they should not test anyone after they test positive once for the antigen, because your body will then be shedding viruses, whatever the virus is, for 90 days. And you'll probably get false positives." So then I talked to one of my COVID monitor friends, and he tells me that I started investigating. And he started telling me, so I find this out, and I'm like, oh my God. You know, everybody thinks they're getting tested for COVID. Also, the same thing in the tents all over town, getting testing, you know, drive-through testing with people lined up for miles. So also, a COVID test is $220 per person. This isn't a business that nickels and dimes us on overtime and makes them 10-minute increments, so they don't have to pay us 15 or a half an hour overtime. I mean, how does this make sense? This is when I knew that everything was rotten from the top down. And this was a scam and a publicity, a theater, political theater. And where better to go than Hollywood for drama? And Hollywood will give you the drama, and they've got all the props and all the ability to do this, combined with the mainstream media, which is run from this town, you know? And go ahead.
Okay, 2 quick questions. And answer in whatever order you want. So one thing I remember seeing come out of there was how these small restaurants were having to close down, and yet Hollywood would get to have these big elaborate lunch. You'd have these big tents
outside tents
outside. Yeah, there was that restaurant owner who was like showing that video went viral. Okay, so my first question is about that.
That was in the Valley, and Will Wilt did a whole thing on her, and the news media picked up on it because it was the hypocrisy of Hollywood still being able to work. Somehow Gavin Newsom and Hollywood coordinated, and somehow things came together for Hollywood to be an essential job. You know, so we became essential workers, basically. But in doing that, we had to follow these extreme protocols because they knew that people would be like, what the hell is Hollywood doing working? you know? But again, you got to understand that for the big orchestrated picture, we got to keep making content to keep people happy at home. That is no lie, you know? So Hollywood is, and always has been an important component to all propaganda, you know? And especially now when we had streaming and all of that and people could sit at home for hours and binge. So, you know, that was a very important component to this happening at this time, because it could never have happened when we had 3 networks. You know, nobody would stay at home, and they would have been in an uproar. But you know, they've got us numbed out to the fact where, oh, I'll just stay at home and order everything, and watch my Netflix. Go ahead.
Can I ask one other question?
Sure, I'm going anyway. Go ahead.
No, okay, sorry. One other question. When I talk about my old industry of mainstream news, I really feel like the average person in my business, my old business, is a filter for information without necessarily always knowing that they're spreading bias, propaganda, whatever you want to call it.
That show, that one of the shows that I love that you did was the one you said that they just get, the journalists these days are so lazy, they just get info from the government and say,
or
oh yeah,
they just don't have the time, or it's just like a daddy thing, you know. It's like daddy told us, you know, daddy told us, and so it's just that archetypal, like, you haven't dealt with your daddy or mommy issues, and you're going to work and you're a human just like everybody else, and so you're just trusting authority. So it's any number of things, but I was just curious, like in Hollywood, do you feel like they're a bunch of bots too, or do they really know they're, you know, what they're doing?
100%, especially in my department background, but 100%. There is so much competition. You have to understand, in Hollywood, we don't get hired for 10 years on one job. We go from job to job to job. And then they can always use the excuse of, well, he just wasn't right for the job, you know, or he didn't have the right look. Although we've got all this, you know, critical race crap going on, and it's like we're not supposed to have any discrimination, yet I'm looking for a Latino to play this part, or I'm looking for a Black person to play this part in South LA as a gang member. So, you know, and then people are saying, why are we looking at color? Well, the author didn't freaking write his story that way. You know, he's doing real life, but they're not. I mean, Hollywood isn't doing real life anymore. They stopped doing that like about 10 years ago. Everything's made up.
Hollywood is just like, because they do like to, it does seem like they always, like the Oscars or whatever else, are always jumping on whatever the popular thing is. Do you think these people believe they really care about these causes, or like, do they know it's an ego thing?
No, they're on it just like corporations are right now. They're on this right now because they think it's where the money is going to be. And I can tell you that 80% of, just like in the country, there's a silent majority in this town that isn't saying anything. I'm like one person. I have tried to make videos. I have called out the union. I have called out the head of the union, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, who is like a radical left, and Kateris, the president. I have called them out. I have tagged all my videos. My videos are public on YouTube on my channel. Anyone can access them, the small ones that I did and sent you, where I was calling them out and wanting transparency and saying, you guys aren't following the science. Who are you following? They didn't care. It's like everything nowadays. Just ignore the truth tellers. Just ignore the real science and don't bring it up, and just keep pounding our narrative. That's all. That's all. And the narrative and COVID, and it, you know, how did COVID become like, if you have a mask in your car with your windows rolled up, you're a Biden supporter. If your windows are rolled down and no mask, you're a Trump supporter. You know, I mean,
I saw a guy running by himself outside on the river near here with a mask on. I didn't understand. I really don't understand that.
I live in Beverly Hills. I live in an apartment in Beverly Hills, so don't think that I live in Beverly Hills. It's an old apartment, and they walk their dogs every day here in the morning and at night, in the evenings. It's like a promenade here on my street. It's a great street to walk on, and I'll sit out there and watch people with double masks till this day. Now, if you have masks on, don't you think that you probably got a vaccine? You know, if you're that scared, I bet you went and got a vaccine. you know,
Yeah.
but you're still double masking with your dog walking alone in the 90-degree weather in sunlight.
I love wine, and my favorite kind of wine is a high-altitude Argentinian Malbec. And now you can get 50% off some of my favorite bottles and 50% off shipping by visiting AllisonWinePromo.com. That's Allison with 1L, winepromo.com. These wines come from one of the most isolated winemaking regions in the world, with the Andes Mountains on one side and desert on the other. One of the Malbecs is from the third highest vineyard in the world at 8,950 feet. The reason I love these wines is the altitude means that the UV rays beating down on the grapes is making them work harder, and doctors I talk to say they have higher antioxidant properties. Again, it's AllisonWinePromo.com, Allison with 1L, winepromo.com.